Hi, everybody. It's Amy McCann here. Thank you so much for joining me. I know that if you're watching this, you see somebody on the screen who I'm going to introduce to you in just a moment, and you're going to be so psyched. I'm so excited he's here. But this is really also a celebration because I decided to bring back my love of doing a podcast, which I gave a go at during COVID. And you may recall it was called the Spice of Life Variety Show. And I brought together some creative minds and people who could help us redefine their struggles through uncertainty and to really help us move forward with courage and confidence and to be more innovative during those really tough times. And I recently was a speaker at the Global Consciousness Summit, which is where I met this wonderful guest you're going to meet in a moment. And during that time, it was again an opportunity to sort of share messages about how we can learn to redefine whatever struggles we're going through. And if there's anything I know, we're all human. We have all that in common, and therefore we're all going to experience things differently, but also at an emotional level. And my guest today is really going to help us tune into what it means to have emotional fitness. And I want to say, welcome, Shaun Zetlin from Zetlin Fitness. He is going to share some stories with you. I want to just do a brief introduction to all of the wonderful things he's been doing in the world. So hang in there, Shaun. After overcoming his own physical limitations, having been born with club feet and gross motor skills, coupled with a series of traumatic events and lack of confidence as a young boy, Shaun has made it his mission in adulthood to share his passion, knowledge, and inspiration about proper fitness and health with a positive mindset to help others reach their health and fitness goals through his master mantras and emotional guidance techniques. For 18 years, Shaun has successfully run his own personal training business that includes group and corporate training and nutritional counseling in the New York City metro area. Having started his professional fitness career in Brooklyn, New York, Shaun was proud to have won Best of Brooklyn's Best Personal Trainer in 2020. More recently, his services have extended to Fairfield County, Connecticut, where he now resides with his wife and 2 daughters. First of all, congratulations on that most recent
Thank you.
Award and recognition.
Thank you.
Able to relate and adapt to each client through empathy, passion, and patience, Shaun prides himself on developing exercise programs and nutritional plans that address each person's individual needs. His clientele reflects all walks of life, from the beginner to the bodybuilder, the expectant mother, the seasoned athlete, the senior citizen, to the professional dancer, among others. Shaun's specialties include strength and conditioning, weight loss, corrective exercise, and postural techniques, to name a few. Shaun is the author of the acclaimed Push-Up Progression book series that has been featured by Discovery Channel, Health.com, The Active Times, and Yahoo Health. He received his bachelor's degree from the University of Delaware and holds a variety of certifications from the National Academy of Sports Medicine and the International Sports Sciences Association. It is also with these 2 accredited associations that Shaun has been a continuing education unit provider for his course, Push-Up Progression Specialist, based upon his books since 2015. And Shaun's latest book, Emotional Fitness, was released in February of 2020, and I just recently purchased that, and I invite you to also go on Amazon and get it. I'm diving in and I love it. It focuses on empowering the reader emotionally through exercises and guiding them in coping with daily stresses, fear, anxiety, depression, and even trauma. And of course, here at Amy McCann Coaching, we are all about these things and more to help you run your life and your business without running yourself down unnecessarily in the process. Additionally, Shaun's literary work has been featured in a multitude of books, magazines, websites, televisions, podcasts, and radio, including the Global Consciousness Summit, which I mentioned a moment ago, The Powerful Man, Men's Journal, The Huffington Post, Thrive Global, and the list goes on and on. And with that, Shaun, I welcome you to our podcast, the very first one that I'm kicking off, where we call it Redefine Your Struggle. So I want to open with you just sharing a little bit about a story that maybe I haven't even heard, that our listeners and our viewers can learn from, and some obstacles you faced, and some success that you also experienced through that.
Thank you, Amy. I just want to say offhand, I am so thrilled, excited, and honored to be here, especially for the first, episode podcast back. So off the bat, I just want to say thank you so much for having me. So
Absolutely.
thank you for that. I want to start with, I want to talk about myself so your viewers can get to know me a little bit better. And I know some people are going to be watching this video, some people are going to be listening. And I think the big takeaway to start is never judge a book by its cover. As you mentioned, I've been a personal trainer for 18 years. I've worked with all different types of people. And I think when people first meet me, and I say this humbly, of course, they don't understand that I had struggles as a child, as they look at me as a grown man, somebody who's fit and who has muscles. And I think that's a really important message, where you may look at somebody right now in your daily life and you don't understand possibly what that person has overcome to get to where they are now. So that's a very, very important message. But I was the kid who, and I think a lot of people in the fitness world lead by example, where they want to help, they want to encourage, they want to inspire. I truly believe that. And most people that I've met in the fitness world, other personal trainers, massage therapists, physical therapists, etc., they all share that common goal to want to help somebody because they themselves have had a struggle, let's say, as a young person. And so, I was a child who was picked last in gym class. You mentioned the gross motor skills. I couldn't catch a ball. I couldn't kick properly. I was bullied and teased for not being athletic at all. And I certainly wanted to be, and I certainly worked hard at it, but it was something that I just struggled with physically. And it wasn't until I was about 13 where my dad was a professional bodybuilder. And to his credit, he never sort of forced me, encouraged me to be an athlete. He himself was an athlete. But I had taken it upon myself. I remember very clearly, this is something I haven't told anybody actually in public, where I was in my bedroom, I was 11 years old, and I was picturing myself as this knight. I was picturing myself as this knight wanting to save a damsel, and I had an itch on my side. And so I itched my side, and I kind of felt a roll of fat. And I was sort of a chubby 11-year-old kid. And that is not how I was picturing myself in this vision I had of myself. I would get him with a strapping knight, going to save this damsel. And this to me is what sort of then encouraged myself to want to get fit, to want to get healthy, to really work harder, to be an athlete. And so I think it's really important early on. The two messages are that, your struggles do not define you. That's a very, very important thing. They only should hopefully inspire you. And I had to replace at a very young age, fear with love. And that to me was the inner will that I thankfully was blessed to have. Because some people have to work hard on that, and I felt very blessed, but there are other obstacles that I had to certainly work harder at. But that was sort of the road for me when it came to self-love at a very early age.
Wow, you were 11?
11 years old.
Wow, that's
and
amazing.
during that time, and I don't want to be super heavy, but I know this is an important podcast, an important interview, because we're trying to encourage people to better themselves, especially, people that may find it hard to talk about those deep things with other people. But I had a series of trauma as a child, where it was sort of one traumatic event after another, most of which I just couldn't control, especially being a child. And so I think it would have been very easy for me to take a different path and to take sort of a darker path. And, I talked about the gross motor skills and the club feet. Fortunately, I was born with that. There was a series of bullying, there was sexual abuse, there was just all these things that were sort of coupled upon each other. And I think that's very difficult as a child, especially at the age of 11, to understand and even to comprehend. But I had a good support system, but most importantly, within myself, I realized that I kept the hope that there was something better to this world, there was something better to this life. But again, that's really where my journey really begins, where it really was all about self-improvement, self-love, and not only how can I save myself, which fitness certainly did, but how can I save others?
That's wonderful. And I know you mentioned that your father was a bodybuilder, so he was one of your role models. And
Yes.
I talk a lot about how that is such an integral thing to look for, which is your role models in life, both good and bad. And when I think about your father being a good one, do you have one in your life who you don't need to mention, who was a bad one that you got a lesson from that now serves as a positive reinforcement for you that life is good?
100%. And, I feel like I've lived three different lives so far in the sense of, and I say that's a little dramatic to say, but, there was one chapter in my life, which was Delaware, where I grew up. There was another chapter in my life, which was New York City, which I was there for almost 20 years. And now I'm in Connecticut, which is going to be a new life, especially for my young girls. But there was a lot of lessons in my childhood, and not everybody was kind. There were plenty of kind people. There was plenty of teachers and counselors and friends that I had that were very, very positive, encouraging, I have super fond memories of. And then there were people that were not. And I think it's very important that what you just said was so excellent and it's so layered and so beautiful, Amy, in the sense of, what we're talking about is there are negative people in your life. There are bad people in your life. There are people that are going to hurt you. And you do have some choices. You are not powerless. And it's very important to remember that these are all teaching moments, as hard as they are. As hard as they are, and it's very difficult to forgive somebody who has hurt you. And you don't have to necessarily forgive them, but you have to forgive yourself so you don't continuously, we've all heard it, drink that poison. But that is so true. That is so true because you're the one who continues to suffer. So I had to make a lot of peace when I moved to New York. There was a lot of things that I was was a big transition period of my life. And I was really wanting to start my career. At that time, it wasn't necessarily fitness, but it was very important for me to forgive the people that had hurt me intentionally, unintentionally, so I could continuously love myself.
So when you say that, I wonder where was, or are you even aware yet where that pivotal moment was for you, where you knew you had to do that, where it became necessary for that to be the pivot in order for you to become more self-loving? Was there a specific thing that happened?
Well, that's a great question. To be super transparent, I didn't want to suffer anymore. I was suffering with anxiety. I didn't know it was anxiety. I didn't know that I was anxious. I just knew I was feeling emotions that were robbing me of the present. I just knew that I couldn't be present. I was always sort of on edge. I was sort of worried about making a career, worried about possibly being famous at the time, worried about people liking me, what my image was, all the things that I think we all sort of worry about, but we're all sort of scared to admit. And then I just got to the point where I had to stop. I had to stop. And the big lesson that I've learned along my journey, not to skip some steps here, because I certainly don't want to do that, but it's a very important lesson early on, because it sort of ties into what you asked before about learning from other people that have hurt you. It's truly never about you. It's more about them. And I say this to my clients constantly. It's a reflection of their character, not yours. Because it's so easy when you're a victim of abuse to blame yourself. Well, oh, I deserve to be abused because I look that way, I dress that way, I acted that way. I deserve that. I deserved it. So that's my punishment. It couldn't be further from the truth. It could not be further from the truth. It is all about, again, how that person is treating you. It's about them, not about you. And that gets lost. That message always gets lost.
I have to agree that it gets lost. I think that it's spoken a lot. I think that there's a lot of awareness around it, but at the same time, I think that once you cross over into actually making that profound move to understand that that is about that person, then you're able, don't you believe, to just sort of come back to yourself in a way that maybe you never have.
100%. My parents didn't treat me this way. My friends didn't treat me this way. My lover didn't treat me this way. My best friend didn't treat me this way. The list goes on. My boss didn't treat me this way. And it's very easy to go down the list and continuously blame yourself. But once you really look outside and then can love yourself from the inside, that is how you get your power back. And it's so easy to say, right? It's very easy for us to talk about it, but it takes work. It truly takes work. It's the silliest thing in the world for us to say to each other, self-love. Just love yourself. That's very difficult for most people. That is so hard because if you think about the words, I say to clients all the time, catch yourself. Catch yourself all day. What are you saying to yourself? How are you treating yourself? What words do you associate yourself when you're doing a certain task? And would you use those same words to your spouse or to your best friend? And if you did, would they still be your friend or would they still be married to you? It's amazing how we treat ourselves internally and how we treat others.
For any of you listening and watching, think of right now, this is a great opportunity for you to think about how you're speaking to yourself today. And Shaun, do you have any examples of some of the things people have shared with you that they do say to themselves?
Absolutely. I mean, the words, I mean, and they're harsh words, you know. Certain clients will say to me, you know, I'm a loser, I'm not worthy, I'm ugly, um, I've never been good, I'm bad. And these are words that for most of us, we've learned these in an early age of our lives, in childhood, from a teacher, a parent, a counselor. Again, some is intentional, some is intentional. And the sense of is that that's where, again, you know, our sense of self is really, it grows. And the unfortunate thing is that at such a young age, we're so impressionable, we start believing it. We're living in this sort of dogma world, if you will. And so just for example, you know, my mom said this to me, and so I need to believe it because my mom is my role model, so I must be this. I get that a lot from a lot of clients, and I keep telling them in their journey, you learn this, you weren't born this way, you weren't born to think this way about yourself. You were taught this, it's not true, but it's so deep ingrained in the subconscious that I have to get it out of them. We work together on that. And there are certain triggers, and there's certain triggers. And I think especially when you're a parent, like I know you're a parent, I'm a parent, my girls are very young, they're 4 and 2, and I'm super proud to be a dad. But I would have to be super honest to say to you that there are certain triggers that I still experience as a parent where it takes me back to my own childhood. So these are all just great lessons. They're all great healing experiences. But I think going back to the original question and what you said for your viewers, it is so important to catch yourself, write it down. I say to clients all the time, use the note app on your iPhone, jot down certain words. And at the end of the day, or even at the end of the week, what words have you used to describe yourself? And is that even true? And then where did you get it from? And can you put those words, you know, to an image?
Absolutely. And going back to what you were saying about not judging a person not judging anyone by the cover is it's interesting because we look at people, sometimes we think they're really happy.
Mm-hmm.
And in the meantime, at home, they're beating themselves up. And so a lot of times we forget that we're just all human kind of doing this experience. And most of us have that in common. I would say that we say these things to ourselves. Do you have a specific time or story in your life that really just was impactful? Maybe just a moment or a memory that took you to the other side of that, whatever it was, the disappointment or heartbreak.
Yeah, I think, you know, for me, I had made the decision where I moved to New York originally, and I was going to be an actor, and I wanted to be an actor, and I wanted to also write, and I had some good success. Good is obviously a subjective word, but I was able to accomplish some things. And then I had this pivotal moment where I realized, you know, I don't know if this world is for me. And no disrespect to anybody out there. I mean, I still will love acting and performing. Obviously, this is part of our performance art, but it's certainly real and genuine. But there is a part of me that will always miss it. But I knew it wasn't always my calling. I knew that there was something bigger for me that I had to do, and I didn't know what that was. And then I sort of was helping a friend at the local gym, and long story short, the fitness manager said, you know, you seem to really like this. You seem to be very passionate about it. We are hiring. Would you want to work in this field? Would you want to become a personal trainer? And I had any certifications. I had my dad's, you know, knowledge, but I wasn't certified. And that's sort of what began my fitness journey. And as I became certified, I remember taking this workshop in Manhattan, and I was with a sea of people. I mean, there must have been 200 people in this big room, and we all were in the push-up position. And we all were in the high plank position. So, you know, we're trying to find that neutral spine, and the instructor was coming along, and he was, you know, sort of adjusting people, but nobody could really see because everyone's looking down, because obviously you're in that pronated position. So he gets to me, and I am not doing the neutral spine. And I thought I was actually crushing it. And I was like quite proud of myself, but I wasn't. I absolutely wasn't. And he came over and he started adjusting me, and he had everybody stop. And everybody started looking at me. Now, this has got to be probably one of my worst fears at the time, because I had all this bullying when it came to being an athlete in camp, and, you know, when I was really young, you know, before the age of 11. And now here I am, fitter, more muscles, not overweight, and I thought I was doing a pretty good job, but I wasn't, as I said. And it made me spin back. It made me have a tail spin back, and I felt like the inner child came out. I felt like I was 10. I felt like I was powerless. and I was incredibly embarrassed. And he fixed my spine the way it should be, and then we went along with the workshop. And then afterwards, I was very, very, very upset and felt so much shame and really felt debilitated. Like I felt all the anxiety rush back. So I take the subway back to my apartment. I look at myself in the mirror very dramatically, splash water on my face right out of a movie scene. And I made that promise to myself, Amy. This is a true story, and I write this in Emotional Fitness. I made that promise to myself that I would absolutely master the push-up, because the push-up to me was very symbolic. You know, your hands are on the floor, they're on the ground, you're on the earth. You're feeling grounded. The idea of feeling grounded, feeling grounded, and then pushing yourself up. You know, from a kid who had no upper body strength, but the idea of really embracing your problems, not being afraid of them, but embracing them, pushing them not away, but pushing them down because you've overcome them. That was the image I kept thinking to myself. You know, the weight of the world was on my back, right? All the trauma that I had as a child, you know, the 4 different experiences that I had with trauma as a child, which I write about in the book. And then just sort of exploding up into that push-up position where, again, I'm not running from the problems, I'm embracing it. And I made that promise to myself. And then from there, Amy, I worked so hard. I mean, there wasn't anything sort of sexy about it, where it was just like super hard, you know, work at home, in my apartment, at the gym, you know, trying to master the neutral spine. And then from there, a humble brag, you know, to be able to teach other personal trainers push-ups and to write push-up books and do a challenge with Health Magazine, etc. It really was truly a dream come true, because I will never forget about that day. And that could have, again, it could have taken me to another path. You know, maybe I would have just said, well, forget fitness, it's not for me. Look what it brought out. But it really was an opportunity to right the wrong. It was to right the wrong. I couldn't do it when I was 11, but I could do it, let's say, in my early 20s. And that felt really good that I could do that for my inner child.
That is so beautiful. And that is the message and part of the story you shared, excuse me, in the Global Consciousness Summit. And what really spoke to me was this brilliant way of how you combined emotional fitness with your physical fitness. Just that tying in of your emotional life to a physical push-up was just really brilliant to me. And I found that fascinating because, of course, you and I spoke recently, and we were saying that a lot of times people will say the spiritual, mental, and physical health are separate things, and they tend to approach them separately. And here in what I do, I bring all of that together as best I can, and also with guests like you who are able to sort of put this picture to it and help us imagine it differently so that we understand what it means to be both physically fit and emotionally fit. So I have a kitty right here, sorry.
Oh, no, I love cats.
He
Awesome.
likes to be in the camera. I have 2 kitties that love to be here.
Oh, what's his name?
This one's Oreo. Oreo.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
Hey, Oreo.
So yeah, just that combination and the story that you shared, and you know how your emotional pain was connected to that push up. And I love the visual and the experience of, you know, it's you're either pushing down your emotions or you're pushing up. It just that whole connection for me spoke volumes. And that's what really made me want you to be a guest today, to sort of impart that forward and or pay it forward. So he's sneezing. And what made me laugh
Don't get sick, Oreo.
Don't get sick, please.
Don't get sick.
What was funny to me too is people who have followed me. Last year I did a what do you call it? A challenge to do a 20 push-ups per day for 20 days. And I did it on video every day. And it was to benefit veterans. And I wish I had known you then, because every day
I would have loved to help you.
Pushing like hell to get
Oh, absolutely.
And, you know, I think I improved, but the point is, you know, I went after it, and sometimes we have to go after things, right, in order to grow and to sort of look foolish sometimes, I think. I know you're mentioning how you felt humiliated, and that led you to make that connection. But sometimes, isn't it good also for us to sort of put ourselves in positions where not necessarily humiliated, but that we're we may not look our best, like me with the push-ups. I know they were not the best, and they were not, but it wasn't about that. It was about, okay, connecting. For me, this is what I've taught students, is that if you connect to something important with your physical life, you're more likely to do exercise. My challenge for myself was I wanted to learn how to do push-ups. So I connected it to a cause that I really believe in. And therefore I showed up every day because it had meaning to it. Right?
Bravo, Amy. Yes,
even in the
bravo.
face of looking silly.
Yes.
And so that's why I resonate with your message in terms of how we connect our emotional selves to that thing we might not want to do, that push up, that weightlifting, or even a walk down the street when you're depressed and you're not feeling like you want to walk, right? If you can just get yourself to do that physical motion, you can tie it into that emotional fitness as well.
100%. And then and bravo, because that's, first of all, that's a tremendous message, that you're just giving to the world. That's a gift. It really is. And what a great cause. What a great cause. But what you said was so powerful, because you're right. If you're not inspired to do it for yourself, okay, well, and I'm not saying that was you, of course, but if somebody is not inspired to, again, work out or move their body because they're feeling so badly about themselves, okay, they're doing it for a cause, doing it for somebody that they love. And the beautiful part about all that is that the hope that I like to teach as well is that the emotion that you experience, and nothing is ever good and bad, it's just purely emotion. But the hope is that when you do move your body, it spills into all areas of your life. So you feel powerful in your workout, but because you worked out, because you walked, you feel powerful when you're doing a podcast. You feel powerful, when you're, out to dinner. It just gives you confidence. It fills your cup. It fills your soul, and it really helps you get to your authentic self.
Yes.
That is the hope from movement. I mean, that to me is the message I really want to bring across, because I think that is it's so silly to say, but it really is the truth. When we're all feeling anxious, depressed, or if you're a trauma survivor, or you have stress in your life, the last thing you want to do is probably move your body. People don't really choose to do that. And it is a choice most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time it is a choice. And so to make that choice and to commit, because I think the worst thing you can do is, I was talking to a client about this last night, you're feeling bad about yourself, you don't do your homework, you don't work out, and then you eat, let's say, a bowl of ice cream, and then you feel bad that you ate the ice cream. So you didn't commit to your decision, because now you feel guilt and shame. And guilt, by the way, is a useless emotion. It truly is so useless, but you feel the guilt, you feel the shame, and then the cycle keeps repeating. Versus, okay, I'm going to make a decision, whether it's ice cream or workout, but I'm going to own it. I'm going to make that decision, I'm going to own it, and now I move forward. Because, the world, I talked about some things that happened to me, but the world is a cruel place, not all the time, but sometimes. And the last thing we want to do is, we don't want to beat ourselves up if we don't have to. We want to love ourselves. We want to replace the fear with love. We want to be kind to ourselves. That is so important.
Absolutely. And what you said, and I think it's really important to mention, because I know that sometimes people say, well, there are people who are disabled or handicapped in some way. And I have to mention that because that was part of my life when my boyfriend years ago had been paralyzed, and then he became my husband and we had kids together. And it's an awesome
Beautiful.
Story in the sense that things, we grew through that experience, but the real life, the thing we have to really understand is that life can switch in a moment. We all learned that through COVID, I think, as a collective species. But life can change on a dime. And when it does, you can lose all of your physical self. In my former husband's case, it was from the neck down. And so he was a physical person, very much fit, and he was in the military. He was very much a physical person. But the long story short here is, even through that, had he not kept motion every day through physical therapy, for example, range of motion exercises, either with me or with an aide, he would have atrophied, right? Mm-hmm. And also just moving his muscles kept his spirits up, because he was moving and getting the blood flowing. And so I think that it's really important, especially we're coming upon Thanksgiving, to be thankful for what we do have. And even if you have lost some sort of physical part of yourself, to know that there's something there. There's either a smile, there's eyes, there's something to move that can help move that emotional self to the forefront, right? To express yourself in ways that maybe you couldn't do before, but now you can do differently.
Beautiful. Amy, that was beautiful. Absolutely. It doesn't have to be, a CrossFit boot camp type of workout if you're unable to do that. As you said, it could be a smile, it could be a wink, it could be a tap. That's beautiful. I completely agree.
Yeah, absolutely. And, in terms of your mantras, I know you outlined them in the summit and you have them in your book. And again, I want to say to my listeners and viewers, please go on Amazon and find his book. He'll, I'm sure, tell us at the end how you can reach him as well. But can you just briefly go through the 5 mantras, just to kind of give us a sense of where you're at and how you think about all of this?
Absolutely. And a quick background was working with a beautiful therapist, and we were talking about the journey that I needed to go on, which was healing my childhood and to feeling whole and replacing shame and some of those emotions that are discouraging with love. And I would purposely schedule a session with her, and this is when I was living in Brooklyn, and then I would go to the gym and I would do my own workout, and I would have my headphones on and would really be all business and not really talk to people and just really concentrate on it. I would go to this one particular area I always sort of carve for myself and work out. And, as I was working out and doing these things that empowered me physically, emotionally speaking, some of the things that I was talking about with the therapist would spill into my thoughts. And then I would jot them down through the app, obviously on your phone. And they became just sort of like these one-off sentences, and the grammar was even great. They were just sort of just like little vignettes, little notes I was making to myself. And then they turned out to be these like big mantras that sort of like took on a whole life of their own. The first one for me, and I think it's the hardest one because it's the first step, is accepting your past. So for me, I had to accept the things that I wish that my childhood was a bit different. I wish that I didn't have certain struggles. I wish that I didn't have a bully, the sexual abuse, all the physical stuff that I couldn't control. Unfortunately, that was my past, and it's really hard to accept those things. So that was number one. Number two, and it really goes into number one. It's believing that you are worthy. And again, I had some teachers that were unkind. I had some counselors that were unkind, and they told me some things about myself that just were not true. And as a young child, given all that trauma, you start to believe it. So if all these bad things happen to you physically, and then people are telling you verbal things, well, you really start to believe it as a young kid, because obviously, we're so impressionable. So number two is, it's a very important piece, believing you're worthy, which goes into number three, which is believing that you are empowered. Believing you are empowered. It's a reminder that you have power. It's a reminder that you don't have to be a victim, that you can, again, we talked about this before, where, bad people can be learning experiences, triggers can be learning experiences. So it's very important to remember your power. And that, what I'll say about that is, with you're empowered is, validation is a big part of that, and you and I talked about off camera about applause and needing everybody to love us. And I say this constantly, Amy, every day to clients and friends. If you need one person in the world to tell you that you're great, you will need everybody to. So, it's very important. 99% of the time, if everybody tells you you're great, 1% of the time somebody tells you you're not, you're going to latch onto that. You're going to attach to that. So it's a reminder that validation is an inside source. You think you're great, you're great. If you think you're not, you're not. It's really what it comes down to. Number 4 is lower the volume. And so by volume, I mean, this speaks to the trauma survivors or people who are currently going through trauma, where unfortunately, trauma never goes away. I think if you're a trauma survivor, you understand that. But the idea here is in emotional fitness is we want to lower the volume. My goal is to give everyone a different coping mechanism, where if the volume is very loud, you're hearing the trauma, it's very, very loud, where we want to just turn that knob down to a whisper, and that's obviously in the book. And then last but not least, the last mantra is being your biggest fan. This goes back to what we talked about before about, hearing something in your voice where you're a loser, or I'm bad, or I'm not great, Or I'm not going to get on Amy McCann's show because I'm just going to mess up and stumble and I'm going to not be articulate and they're going to be like, why is he even here? And he's an imposter, you know? But no, you want to replace all of that with Shaun Zetlin. I'm a good person. I love people. I want to make the world better. So anyway, you want to be your biggest fan. And that, to me, that's not arrogant. I mean, to me, it's genuine. You know, one of my favorite lines is, and I personally love lions. I love lions. I don't mention this in the book, but I've always loved lions. They were, as a child going through all the trauma, lions to me were everything that I wanted to be, right? King of the jungle, but then heart of the lion. You know, so emotional, passionate, you know, big heart, but also a scary dude. And I say all that because my favorite line, I don't know where I heard it. I mean, I should Google it because I don't want to take credit for this line. But the line is, another lion doesn't need to tell another lion it's a lion. It just knows it's a lion, right? So if somebody has to say, oh, I sold all these books, or I'm so great, I'm so this, well, clearly they're not a lion, you know? So I always love that line. So those are the five master mantras. But each one of them is so powerful, and they do go in order, but honestly, for some of my clients and patients that I've worked with now, including myself, you can sort of skip a mantra and go to the next one if that's the particular mantra that you need to work on. So they don't honestly have to be in order, but they're all important, they're all vital depending on the person.
Well, I'm so happy you outlined them again, and I wrote them down again, and I love, you know, the fact that you mentioned that it's so hard for us to accept our past, but at some point we have to realize this was our past, and you have a whole way of looking at that in your book, and believing that you're worthy. Number two, you believe that you're empowered. And I like how you brought in the validation part of it, and how you said, you know, if you need one person, then you need everybody, you know, it's just, and it really is. And sometimes that can be a vicious cycle, right? If you're looking for the applause.
Absolutely.
And the way I worded it when we were speaking was, you know, we're looking here to build a cause rather than get applause. So not necessarily.
Ironically,
right?
I'm going to clap for that. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I just got applause for the non-applause. But we are aware that not everyone's going to resonate with this message. Not everybody's going to tune in or even like us or even like the way we look, you know, and that's part of life. And I think sometimes people stop themselves or can't get through struggles because they're so concerned about what other people might think. And that's a real struggle for people, I think. So I like how you are helping people feel empowered. And also when you say lower the volume, you know, on trauma, and mentioning that it is always there. I know I've learned that through therapists as well, that I think what people try to do many times is push it down. We think of the push-up, right? It's just, they're just trying to push that trauma down. And when we can accept that as part of our history, our personal history, we can learn to cope differently, as you said. And I think of some programs I had in the past where I would tagline it, lower the temperature on stress, because stress is never going to go away. What we need to do is we need to mold it, shape it, deal with it, play with it, wrestle with it, all of those things differently. I don't like to use the word even manage, because I don't think we need to manage stress. I think we need to embrace it in different ways, much the same way we do our trauma. So I resonate with your message, and I think my listeners will as well. You're welcome. And then finally, being your biggest fan. I mean, that too is really difficult if you're saying what you said in the beginning, which is those words to yourself, or those sentences, or that thought about yourself, or maybe somebody else's voice in your head. That becomes a very difficult thing to do if that's playing in your head all day long to be your biggest fan. So being able to get to that is hugely beneficial for your life, I think. And, you know, just me being on this podcast, I want to pause for a minute to say that you were really that sort of pivotal final moment for me where I said, okay, it's time to do this again, because I find such joy and passion in learning from people like you, who are bringing these messages that align with mine, but also have differences. And I do want to bring on people who have different messages as well that don't necessarily align with mine. I think we are in such need these days to learn from one another. And so I feel this is where I'm going to show up more, in terms of what I'm going to bring my listeners. So thank you so much for helping us kick it off, because I believe that the emotional fitness part of it, especially coming on the holidays as we record this, I have my little tree up already. It's not
I
even
can see,
Thanksgiving, but I put it
beautiful.
up.
No, we did too
Yeah.
with young girls.
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
that's true because you
yeah,
have two little ones. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, my girls are teenagers and I'm savoring every moment in their last 2 years of high school. So I'm sort of like doing all these things. But in this time where we're moving into being thankful, I think it's really important for us to start tuning into our emotional health and our
Yeah.
physical health and how that's playing in the world and how it plays in our family, right?
Oh, 100%. And family can be a trigger, especially during the holidays when you're with a
Yes.
family member. And hopefully everybody out there has a good relationship with their parents or an uncle and or aunt or their kids. And if you don't, and you're all are together, the takeaway message is to embrace the good. I mean, as you said, and it was a very, very important message what you just said. I mean, Thanksgiving is a time clearly to be thankful. And so you want to be thankful that you are with people that you do love and that you can accept people's limitations. And I like to use the plate analogy, where if there's somebody in your family that triggers you, that hurts you, whether it again was unintentional or intentional, but again, they had hurt you, it's important to think about it as their plate, right? They may have a paper plate, you may have a china plate, you can handle more than they can handle. You know, you can handle more than they can handle. It's important to sort of get to that point where, you know, you can love them even though they're limited and you can accept them from who they are, which is also a big challenge. But again, I think if you go back to your authentic self, you go back to healing your inner child, you go back to remembering your power. Somebody says something that's going to trigger you, you don't have to resort back to when you were 11 or 10 or younger. No, you're a grown person right now. And so you have the ability to really tell yourself, I'm safe, I love myself. And again, this is somebody who's just very limited. Their plate is not as full as mine, it's not as sturdy as mine. It's a very important message. The other thing I want to say too about Thanksgiving is a lot of times we think about exercise as a chore, and it's really important to remember what we talked about too about the story you told. You know, but it's very, very important to remember that if you can move your body, it's not a chore. It is. You should be grateful. You should really be grateful. I know every time I work out, I'm grateful. Even on days I don't want to work out, and by the way, that is true. There are some days I don't want to work out
I'm
because I'm just
sure.
tired, but I still do. I still do because it is part of my therapy and my healing. But every time I do work out, I do say to myself, this is true, that I feel very grateful. It's almost like saying a blessing before you eat. I feel very grateful that I can move my body because I'm 43. I know one day I may be, hopefully God willing, in my 80s and 90s and won't be able to do physically what I can do now. So it's very, very important to remember, again, if you're able to move, be very grateful for that.
Absolutely. And just remembering back a couple of years ago, Thanksgiving morning, I went to the gym and worked out with my personal trainer, and he was so impressed that I came that day. I was on the calendar and I told him, I said, I will see you Thanksgiving morning. And he said, really? And I said, no, I'll be here because I was always there. And I said, you know me, if I say I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. And sure enough,
That's right.
I got up
That's
5 o'clock that morning. I went into the gym.
Wow, good for you.
Yeah, it was awesome. So, I mean, if I can do it, anybody can do it. And I came back and I made dinner for my family that morning. It was great. It was just
Amazing.
another example of, and I go back to what you just said, really being thankful for the capability of being able to move. I learned long ago not to take it for granted. And you and I spoke about how I believe it's my medicine against
Yeah.
feeling anxious or even depressed. And so that's important.
Yeah.
And I love the paper plate, glass plate
Thank
analogy.
you.
And I also think it's important to note that, you know, we too, being really aware of what our plates are that we're holding, not just for others, but, you know, sometimes I think about myself, I'm like, okay, that plate I'm holding is a paper plate. Now that you said
That's
it,
right.
you know, it's like, yeah, I'm not really, you know, this is seeping through or something's not, you know, it's just not. So it's a great visual for me, you know, in terms of how you're handling things.
Yeah. And it's also very, I love that. And to awesome, Amy, and to touch on what you just said, it's also very important to allow yourself to feel any emotions you want to feel. So, you know, in the book, I also talk about having these emotional guidance techniques. And with my young girls, especially my one who's 4, she's, you know, an emotional toddler. She's incredible and amazing. I'm such a proud dad. But one of the early lessons that I told her right now is you can feel any emotion you want to feel. If you feel angry, you can be angry. If you feel sad, you can be sad. I tell her all the time, you just can't hit, you know. But you're allowed to feel anything you want to feel. You're allowed, and if she's allowed to feel anything she needs to feel, us as adults should feel the same way. So I think it's hard. You know, I think for a lot of times where we start to feel vulnerable, again, for some people, and you and I have done the work, But I think for a lot of people, it's hard for them to do the work. It's deep work, what you said. Some people may not like our message, some people may not like the way that we look, etc. But I think really the important piece is, for a lot of people, it may just be too darn difficult. And for those people, my big wish, I mean, my true wish is, if it feels just too raw, you feel too vulnerable, it's too scary, you don't have to tell anybody. You know, I'm a big fan of just getting it down, getting it out. I'm such a fan of journaling, you know, and it doesn't have to be with impeccable grammar. It doesn't have to be for hours upon end. A notebook, composition book, your laptop, your phone. You don't have to tell anybody, as I said. Especially, you know, I think people who are not used to expressing how they feel, but it's got to come out. Nobody, and I mean nobody, gets out of here alive, meaning like everybody's got something. We all have a past. We all go through life. You know, life is beautiful. I feel so blessed to be a part of life. But it's not always, you know, obviously roses. It's not always like a Disney movie, you know, especially at the end. So it's really important to take some time for yourself. If it feels too scary, can't stress it enough, and please get it out any way you can.
Yeah, and I think it's an important message also to transition into, once it's out, what do we do with it? Because as you know, we have a very angry climate right now in the country and in the world. I wonder what your perspective is on how you might deal with adults who right now, they're explosive. Do you feel that maybe that was something that was, I mean, where do you think all this is coming from? How can they deal with it? Do you have any perspective on that you could share?
Yes, I think, no, it's great. I think anxiety and anger are two different things, but they're also the same thing. So just to clarify on that, if you take a coin, you have anxiety on one side of the coin, anger on the other. I think people are more comfortable with anger because you feel like you're more in control, but you're truly not. So I think, let's say 2019, before March of 2020, when COVID first hit, do I think people were angry then? I do. But I think it got magnified because then all of a sudden things were stripped and taken away. And we all were quarantined. It was a very scary time. I think it was a very anxiety producing time. I myself was in the heart of it, you know, in New York City, living in Brooklyn Heights, and, you know, the state of New York had 900 people dying a day. It was very frightening. I would hear sirens and just ambulances, and it was just daily. It was very, very scary. But the point is, I think it was bubbling. I think people were angry. I think people, and I say this with respect, I think a lot of people feel in certain ways that they haven't reached their potential. They're angry, they're frustrated. And what you said about stress was really important. And the thing I feel about stress is always evolving. You know, the stresses you had as a teenager are different when you're in 30 and 40 and 50, et cetera. So stress is always going to be there. It just evolves. But I do think that for a lot of people, they were anxious, not necessarily angry. They don't want to feel anxious because you feel very vulnerable when you're anxious. And anxiety is very painful for most people. So they'll choose anger. But again, they're the same thing. So now you have a bunch of angry adults who are maybe upset that their life didn't turn out the way they wanted it to, whether it's with their marriage, their kids, money. And then all that's taken away. Now you're forced to face it because guess what? Things are shut down. And now you're working from home. So if you had some issues at home that you couldn't escape, well, now it's right in front of you, Amy. It's right there. So if you have problems with your spouse, or if you have problems with your kids or money, you can't escape it. So I think COVID just really magnified it. I think it was always there, but I think COVID also gave it that opportunity to really explode like a volcano. So, you know, my clients are beautiful, and I'm so thankful to be with them. And, you know, I think about when we first started with COVID to now. But again, a lot of people, even the most pleasant people, you know, do feel that anger, which again is anxiety. So I think it's so important, again, like what you said about, well, if you journal it, how do you get it out? And my big wish is that if exercise just seems so daunting, and in, you know, in the book, I don't purposely add weights. It's just body weight. It's just your body weight. The assortment of planks, lunges, squats, multi-joint movement that really, you know, tie into multi-muscles. But the idea here is that we got to get stable. You know, if you're angry or anxious, it doesn't matter. You've got to get stable. That's also the first building block of any strength routine. The first building block of any good strength routine would be stability. So if I was teaching somebody to do a push-up first, I would have them do a high plank. I then, of course, go into a low plank. I wouldn't have them do push-ups on their knees. I wouldn't have them have their feet wide apart. I don't believe in that for the core and the spine. No. You know, and so I think it's very, very important to find your stability if you're angry. And people like to feel angry because they like to be in control. But the joke's on them. You're not in control. I want to keep making that point because that's such an powerful point. You know, but it's all about stability. It's all about finding stability, through your emotions and through your body.
If we had a word today, if this was Sesame Street, it would be stability, I think. And I love that you bring this perspective up, because first of all, the image of people being stuck in their houses, having to face that person, the spouse maybe that they haven't been able to say things to in a while, now being forced to work at home, deal with all of those things. That's a real eye opener. And hopefully people have learned through this. But I also, the anger, that's obviously also a result of hurt. And I think people were hurting, as you said, in their families, maybe in relationships, and weren't able to process that. And then it just came out as anger. When I think about stability, when I worked with my personal trainer, he was describing how becoming stable in your hips can help you as I get older, going upstairs, for example. And he was explaining how older people, and this is another image kind of thinking about anyone right now going through stress, is when you're stable physically, when you're learning to be stable physically, when you get older, you won't fall down the stairs like a lot of old people do, or older people, because they have very, very weak muscles, or they haven't worked them, some of them. And if we can do that for our physical bodies, I think about in terms of stress, right? Becoming stable in our emotions really helps us avoid that explosive anger or the collapsing down, kind of like the image of a person collapsing down the stairs. If you're collapsing emotionally, that too is going to be a destructive thing, and you can get really hurt. And I think people don't put enough emphasis on how hurtful you can, how much hurt you can cause others and yourself if your emotions are not stable.
Yeah, I agree. Beautiful.
So getting that help, whether it's, through a therapist or through a trainer, or some of it on your own, I think is extremely important. So stability really is something we can all achieve, right?
And think about, we can all achieve, and I definitely want to touch on that in a moment, but what you just said was awesome, Amy, because let's say a child is abused and the child never gets help, and that child develops, some angry emotions or some unhealthy habits, and that child becomes an adult. Does that adult now hurt other people along his or her journey? And how many people, it's like almost like COVID, how COVID affected, obviously, large population in the United States. Well, pain is the same way. Emotional pain is the same way. And so I also think we all have responsibility. I mean, the tactics that you use as a child to cope are not the same tactics or skills that are going to help you as an adult. That's number one. Number two, the logical part of your mind, well, that's a very, very important part. But the emotional part has got to make that decision first, because the logical part will always be the last part. It's the emotion first. And we got to get past the emotion of it. And then I think thirdly, a really, really important point in all this is that you have responsibility. I mean, I say that kindly to everyone who's listening, but if you've been hurt, you have responsibility to help yourself so you don't hurt others. It's one thing if you don't want to do it because you're afraid, and I understand that, and I understand the struggle that is involved with that. I know I don't mean to stereotype, but I just know I work with a lot of men who have a big, big issue with being vulnerable for fear of being judged, and suicide rate from men who are 11 to 40, it's unbelievable. It's the second, biggest killer in that age group. One is accidents, and I certainly think that that's obviously involved, and that there's a connection there. But men just don't like to talk, and I think again, it's just this what society has brought. You're wounds. I don't want to say anything that's derogatory, but the names that men tell themselves if they're vulnerable. And that's why I think it's very important for me to be a man and just to be very free with my talk. Now, the reason why I can be free with my talk is because that I have healed, because I have done the work, because I am over the things that would have caused me embarrassed. If I had embarrassment or shame still, I wouldn't have come on your show, But I can say it with a smile that I am on the other side, but it takes work. It takes a lot of work. It takes time, but there are blueprints. And so when you said, can stability help everybody? Yes. And you can have that emotional freedom and live your best life. Do I still get anxious here and there? Of course. But do I manage it? Absolutely. Is it chronic? No way. Yeah. Do I still hear the trauma at times? Sure. Do I get triggered sometimes? Absolutely. But does it last? No. And that's what I want for everybody. That's why, honestly, and I write this in the book, and I say this humbly, that's why I had to write the book. I mean, I remember I was sitting in Brooklyn Heights with my wife. She was my fiance at the time. And she said to me, and she said, you know, you have to tell your story. And I said, no, I can possibly not tell my story. I can't tell people about all these things that happened to me as a child. What would people think? What would my parents think? What would, you know, everyone that I love and care about think? And these are very, very personal stories, and I can't do it. And she said to Shaun, you have responsibility because you can help so many people. And so when I started writing about the very deep personal stuff that happened to me, favorite is not the right word, but really what made it all worth it was there was a young kid who did email me, who had told me, you know, when I first started becoming public in 2018 with some of the things that have happened to me as a child, this particular person, name I'll keep obviously confidential, wrote to me and said the same things that happened to him, and that he didn't tell anybody, not his parents, not his girlfriend, but it had given him the courage to tell a counselor. And then from there, he said he was going to come up with a blueprint on how to tell his girlfriend and then his parents. And I was like, that's it. It's all worth it. I helped one person. I helped a young person. And I say that humbly, of course.
That's amazing. That's unbelievably amazing. And of course, this is the more profound message of what you have to offer. And what I knew you had to offer during our discussions, you had mentioned the suicide rates and all of this, and just putting your voice out there is so important for that reason. If that's only one child in this world that you've helped, which you have, that is really where this show and your shows and everyone who, you know, listens to your message can benefit from. And so, you know, if you're out there, if you are that person, you're afraid to speak out, you're afraid to maybe share even an emotion that's bubbling up, perhaps the show will serve as your opportunity and even your permission to allow that to unfold. I'm so grateful you're here. Again, it's Thanksgiving and such a perfect time to talk about all of this. I was thinking about when you're talking about how infectious, you know, these things can be, like anger and all this, but the flip side is how infectious our joy can be, and our thankfulness and our gratitude, and all of it, right? All of it can be an infectious thing that we choose to spread or not. And on that note, if there's anything else you want to share, I would love to invite you to. But before I do, I just want to say to my audience that Shaun and I were talking behind the scenes. We're hoping to do another project together in the future. I won't reveal what that is yet, but down the road, as I sort of figure out where I want to take all of my messaging, I want to take Shaun along because I think it will be really fun to have his voice as part of this whole vision that I'm imagining. And with that, Shaun, would you like to tell anything else from your personal story, and also where people can find you?
Yeah. Well, first of all, people can find me at zetlinfitness.com. So my last name is Zetlin and then fitness.com. And I would love to end with this because you touched on it as well, where, you know, how can people start? So let's say somebody wants to create more stability, or they want to get the emotion out, or journaling is an avenue that maybe they are considering, but it may not really speak to them. If they can't do it for themselves, how you told your story, you know, before as well, which was really great. Do it for somebody else. You know, do it for somebody else. You know, like if you can't do it for you because you don't feel like you're worthy yet, you're still battling self-love, but you respect the veteran. You know, I mean, there's so many avenues to start, but if somebody is struggling so badly right now and they're hurting so badly right now, please know that your message is received, and that I am sure that there's at least one person in your life that does care and love about you, and that if you have the courage, you can tell that person through text or through an email, or, you know, even just leaving a voicemail. But I think you'll be surprised how people receive you. I think that's very, very important, because it always seems worse in our head. I couldn't possibly tell somebody, what will they think? But I think most of us will be surprised about the network that we have. That's number one. Number two, in the book, and it's not even about my book, but just to create some sort of movement is very, very important, because it's the mind-body connection. And mind-body connection is truly the best source there is to heal. because you're talking, we talked about spirituality very little, but the emotion and the physical really go hand in hand. It really is, it means everything. Because, you know, when trauma resides in the body, stress resides in the body, when people have tense muscles, you know, there's a reason why your body's holding all that. So yes, it needs to be released, but at the same time, the mind-body connection will not fail you. It is the most powerful force. And I think about the movie Rocky, and, you know, I'm one of a handful of people that have had some things happen to them. And I know there are worse, you know, I mean, not to downplay what's happened to me, but there's terrible things that happen every day in the news. But I think about the movie Rocky, like, why is Rocky so powerful? You know, why is Rocky so popular? You know, and I read about this in the book, but it really speaks to me because there's so much emotion involved in the underdog, right? We all love the underdog. It's really easy to hate on the New York Yankees because they're the New York Yankees, and you know they have all the money in the world and they've won 28 world championships, etc. But the underdog is special. You know, David versus Goliath, right? We all love that story. I mean, there's a reason, you know, there's a reason because all of us, I believe, have the underdog in us. Even those who were born with no problems, who seem to have like the most fairy tale life, there is an underdog that resides in all of us. So I encourage everybody to, you know, it doesn't have to be Rocky, it doesn't have to be a sports movie like Rudy, but to really, I want everybody to embrace a character that they would want to help. You know, any character that they would want to help. And pretend that character is with you. Pretend that character is like your workout buddy. You know, again, if you can't do it for yourself, it pains me to say that, Amy, because a lot of people won't do it for themselves to start. And I don't mean to be pessimistic, but to me, it's so sad. And we've all been there. And I say that because I didn't start the journey loving myself the way I should have loved myself. No, I did it for somebody else. You know, I'm going to do it, you know, I'm going to dedicate my workout to this person. I'm going to dedicate my workout to that person. There's always somebody that I'm, you know, when I first started this journey that I was dedicating the workout to. And that's still great to do that. I still do that from time to time. But it's so important to dedicate that workout to yourself. Ken, Rocky, Rudy, your training partner is with you. And just start slow. Don't make these huge, humongous goals for yourself. Start with 5 minutes. Start with a shoulder plank. Start with holding the squat position for 5 seconds. Build to 10 seconds. Build to 15. Feel grounded. Feel stable. Feel your heels. There's so much energy in your heels. I'm always saying that to clients. You know, dome your feet. All 4 corners of your feet are down. Feel your heels. Feel your palms when you're doing the push-ups or when you're just holding that plank. Feel your power. Feel your worthiness. Because you truly are. You truly are. And I encourage everybody, this is the hardest thing, but to look in the mirror, to start your day or end your day, say one kind thing. Say one kind thing that you're so grateful for. One kind thing. And allow that to really stay with you. And then, if you can't, if it's just too difficult, write it down. And it doesn't have to be this monumental accomplishment. It could be, I was nice to the checkout person at Rite Aid. Put it on the wall. And just continue to build on that. So that I really want to leave the viewers with that message.
Well, you heard it from Shaun. That was so powerful. And I love the even if it's you're nice to the checkout girl, you know, giving yourself some credit for moving through your day in a more light and joyful way is really important. So thank you so much for that amazing message. You've brought this the energy up in this show. We have really, really appreciated your message. And on this, again, week before Thanksgiving, I am giving total thanks for having met you and being able to bring you to my audience. Thank you so much. And until then, Shaun said you can reach him at zetlinfitness.com. Is that correct? And you can come to my website, magnificentchange.com. I had to think about what my new website is. I just changed it, magnificentchange.com. You can go there. You can check out my products and services. And I will see you on the other side of this video. Thank you, Shaun.
Thank you, Amy, so much. Thanks for the time.
All righty. Have a great, great day and great week.
Thank you.